Uh-oh. Sounds like somebody's got a case of the Mundus.
You are now listening to the Unscripted Ohio Podcast, brought to you by Buckeye Grove and in part by JFQ Lending. All your home purchase and refinance needs should be handled by a Buckeye. You'll never pay for your appraisal with these guys. Licensed in 33 states and more on the way. Check them out at jfqlending.com. For the latest news, notes, analysis, and discussion, check us out on BuckeyeGrove.com and follow us on Twitter at UnscriptedOhio1. Now, broadcasting from Podcast Central, a place that is not his mother's basement.
Hey, Ma! Can we get some meatloaf?
We promise. Here's your host, Kyle Lamb.
Hey, Ma! The meatloaf!
Buckeyes basketball post-mortem edition of the Unscripted Ohio Podcast. Ohio State going down 74-59 to Houston in the second round of the NCAA tournament. I have some thoughts. I have some observations. I have some analysis. You may agree with it. You may disagree with it, but it's coming right at you. Ohio State football, spring practice, couple observations from the weekend and the previous week. That will be coming up later. A few recruiting items that I want to go over as well, all coming up in the Buckeye Beat. So we'll talk a little Ohio State football later. Ohio State basketball. Let me just get this right out in the open. Okay. When you think back to the start of the season, I think if you imagine, if you try to recollect your expectations for Ohio State basketball this season, remember they lost Keita Bates-Diop, they lost Jayshawn Tate, they lost Cam Williams, they lost Andrew Dockich, who did so much more as a grad transfer from Michigan last year for Ohio State than anybody envisioned. Even Chris Holtmann did not expect the type of production that they would get from Andrew Dockich at point guard. So keep all that in mind. They lost those four guys. Of course, Ohio State lost after actually, finishing one game out of the Big Ten title race last year. They did kind of stumble a little bit down the season. It wasn't a total choke job or a collapse, but they did fall a little bit. They tripped and fell. But you know what? They remember that second round game last year against Gonzaga. They fell behind early by, I don't know how many points it was, 15, 16, 17 points in the first half. But you kind of didn't mind the loss to Gonzaga because, man, they came back from so much down. They took the lead late in the game. They left everything out on the floor you could possibly want them to leave. They were such a fun team to watch, such an inspirational team to watch. And it was kind of, it was a nice getaway from Ohio State basketball of the previous couple of seasons. Thad Matta had a great program, but it fell apart. In the end, his program was defined by guys that just DAF, right? DGAF. And that was the problem, is they weren't getting guys that were all in, that were showing emotion, that were giving consistent effort. And forget the talent. The talent wasn't that bad, although it was in slow decline. It was slowly eroding, but the talent wasn't bad. But because of the way that the team played last year, you didn't mind that they lost to Gonzaga, because even though they had a chance maybe to get a little further in the tournament, they got beat by a good team. That happens. This year, Ohio State did get beat by a good team, but I feel like there's more of a bitter taste in people's mouths than there should be. And it's not that, I think most people were taking the attitude, well, you know what? Chris Holtmann got every bit out of this talent on the team that he possibly could, and we should be happy where Ohio State finished, given all that. And if you look at the expectations to start the year, I think if somebody had told you at the start of the year, remember they were being picked 8th in the Big Ten, and some people had them 9th, 10th. I saw Andy Katz, I think at the start of the year, had them 12th, which was really, I think, a little excessively low. But they finished with 20 wins. They got to the second round of the NCAA tournament. And I think that's about where this team should have finished. But don't overly romanticize the coaching job by Chris Holtmann. And I'm not saying this to disrespect Chris Holtmann, because I think he's a fantastic coach. I do think that they maximize the talent relatively well. But I also think there's a little bit of a gross exaggeration as to what the problems are Now, here's the good news. Whatever I talk about these next couple of minutes, and my opinion of what the problems were, honestly, it becomes a moot point because I promise you, coming up this season, help is on the way. I've been saying that refrain all season long, but it really is true. DJ Carton and CJ Walker going to cure the true point guard problem, okay? And that's where it all starts. It starts with point guard with this team especially because they did not have that true distributor and facilitator as well as the guy that could get into the offense, get the team into the offense as well as create shots. You know, it's nice if you can just have the facilitator, but when the facilitator is also a guy who can create shots for you, that's even better. They've got that coming in DJ Carton as a freshman. They've also got that coming in CJ Walker as a transfer from Florida State. People are going to be very happy with CJ Walker because he's not the most explosive in the world. He's not the biggest. He's not the strongest. He's not the fastest. But he is a very, very savvy player. He works hard. He's very intelligent, plays the game the right way, plays good defense, gets a team into the offense. I promise, from what I hear of him in practice, people are going to like CJ Walker. And DJ Carton is going to be, he's going to be the lightning to the Thunder. He's going to be the guy that brings the dunks and the explosive, blow-bys and the fancy passes and a couple big threes. He's a really good player and a great compliment to CJ Walker. When you add in those two setting the table at point guard, bring in E.J. Liddell, who's just a workhorse, okay? He's a guy that's just a tremendous finisher inside. He's a great go-to guy on the block. He can step out and hit a jumper a little bit. He can defend, big body. And then Alonzo Gaffney, the long athlete. You add in all of those guys to next year's roster, and maybe they add Ibrahima Diallo, the 7-footer that they offered that was on campus a few weeks ago. Maybe they bring him in. Maybe they look at a grad transfer. There's been some speculation whether or not they'll look at Seth Towns of Harvard, former Columbus product. The Justin Pierce kid from William and Mary, who was a 20-10 player as a forward this past year as a junior. There are some options out there, and we'll get into those options more as they come along the next couple of weeks or next couple of months. But just look at what we know Ohio State has coming in. They've got help on the way. They're going to be very entertaining. I think this year, and I said this on Twitter, and I know some of you disagree with me, and I understand where you're coming from, but I want you to hear me out here. Understand my reasoning why I'm saying this. I don't think this is an athleticism issue. So much of basketball, athleticism helps. Don't get me wrong. When you look at Zion Williamson and the freak he is, and great game, by the way. Did you see the Duke UCF game? Who knew that would probably be the best game of the tournament up to this point? I mean, that was an amazing game. Really well played by both teams. Good for UCF hanging in there and giving Duke all that they could handle, and they probably should have won the game. It's their own fault that they didn't. They're up 4 with 30 seconds. They have a steal going in for an alley-oop. It'd be an easy dunk. They could have gone up 6, and then they fumble the alley-oop, and the ball goes out of bounds. The ball was lost, and Duke gets the ball back, and that was an opportunity lost right there. And then, of course, a second opportunity lost when Zion Williamson was trying to tie the game with a free throw. And, I'm not going to blame it on the officials, but let's be honest, there should have been a foul called. There should have been 2 fouls called. There should have been a hook and hold by Zion. I'm sorry, that was actually the play before. The missed hook and hold was the play before, but there should have been also a foul on R.J. Barrett getting the offensive rebound, shoving in the back. But anyway, point is, that was a great game, great finish. Duke made the plays to win that game. But you look at Zion Williamson, right? Let's go back to the athleticism thing. He's a freak. And don't get me wrong, when you have a guy like Zion, that changes your team. It changes everything because he can handle the ball. He can get to the rim. He can beat you off the dribble. He's a fantastic finisher. There's no better finisher in college basketball right now. And he can defend and rebound and do all the little things on top of that. He's not a very good shooter, but he manages to be a fantastic player in spite of his lack of shooting. But Zion Williamson's don't grow on trees. You don't need to have athletes at point guard. And I see so many people saying, well, Ohio State can't create their own shot. That's absolutely true. If you look at a game like Houston, did Houston have better athletes than Ohio State? I would answer yes. But the margin is being grossly exaggerated. And I'm going to tell you why. Do you think Houston had better athletes than Iowa State? I mean, come on. You look at Shayok, and he's an NBA lottery pick, possibly. Their guards are NBA guards. Houston, don't get me wrong, Houston is very talented. They have 4 very good scorers. They are athletic, but they're skilled. And people conflate athleticism for skill sometimes. And I don't think Houston is a more athletic team than Iowa State. Ohio State beat that Iowa State team and led for much of the game. So it's not about athleticism. It's about finishing at the rim. It's about having ball handling. And being a good ball handler, sometimes if you have a good point guard that can handle the ball, that has a good first step, remember, athleticism, you can be a 40-inch athlete and jump out of the gym. It doesn't make you a good finisher. It doesn't make you a good ball handler. Sam Thompson is a good example of this. If you remember back, Ohio State, Sam Thompson is probably the best, most explosive athlete Ohio State has had. I'm trying to think of another player that I would say is a better athlete than Sam Thompson, and I can't think of it. But how many times did you see Sam Thompson put the ball on the deck and go to the rim and finish? Can you remember an instance in your mind where that actually happened? They never tried to get Sam Thompson going to the rim with the ball in his hands. He was always going on back cuts and back screens and going for alley-oops. It's because that's what he was good at. He couldn't beat anybody off the dribble. He couldn't finish. He couldn't get to the rim, not with the ball in his hands. Athleticism isn't about being a great athlete when it comes to finishing at the rim. Ohio State's biggest problem this year, and again, this is kind of a moot conversation because they have all this coming in, but Ohio State's problem is they didn't have ball handlers. They don't have guys that are strong enough. C.J. Jackson lost the ball way too easily. Always has in his career. He's not a true point guard because of that. Not a very good handle, not a tight handle, not strong enough to hold onto the ball and dribbling into traffic. And that's a team-wide problem. This team does not make good decisions with the ball. They dribble into traffic. They have lazy passes. They have ill-advised passes. They try to force passes. They don't come to the ball enough. There are little things that added up with this team. And if you don't have guys that are smart, good ball handlers, have a tight dribble, that are strong at finishing, all of these things make you look less athletic than you might be. Musa Jallow is the best athlete on Ohio State. And to Musa's credit, and to Ohio State's credit, they try to maximize the way he's used. They know his limitations. He's the best athlete on Ohio State, but he's probably the worst ball handler. Okay? So again, athleticism is only one small part of the equation. I look at guys like Mike Conley, who was a great athlete, by the way. There is no doubt about it. Mike Conley, great athlete and still having a great career in the NBA. But, part of the reason he was such a great point guard, explosive first step. He kept the eyes on the defender. He saw what the defense was doing. You can look off your defender and beat somebody because you have a good first step and because you anticipate well. You know what the defense is doing. You know what they're giving you. I think there is too much of an emphasis on athleticism. Ohio State looked like subpar athletes at times this year not because they couldn't get to the rim and finish. We all agree on that. But it's because they don't have the ball handling and some of the small things that make you a good finisher. Beating people off the dribble really isn't just about athleticism. It's the footwork, it's the ball handling, the hand-eye coordination, the instincts. All of these things matter, and Ohio State just didn't have it. They will have it this year, but they didn't have it, currently. Another guy, not a great athlete, but Aaron Craft. Think about the last 2 or 3 years of Aaron Craft's career at Ohio State. Defenders literally played him 2, 3, sometimes 4 foot off the ball. And why did they do that? Because they didn't care if he shot. They were willing to give him, as a 30-point shooter later in his career, they were willing to give him the shot. But they wanted to honor and respect his ability to get to the rim. He wasn't a great athlete. He was a good athlete, but he wasn't a great athlete. But he had a great first step. He had a decent dribble, and he was great at getting to the rim, even though teams knew that was about the only thing he was going to do. So it doesn't really, it's not about athleticism. I think that people are looking at a game like Ohio State and Houston and romanticizing the athleticism disadvantage that Ohio State had. Ohio State, in spite of all its flaws, managed to be a top 20 adjusted defense this year. They could defend regardless of the teams that they were playing athletically. It's when you saw teams highlight the athleticism against the Buckeyes, you know why? It was because of the live ball turnovers. You get these teams that are athletic, you get them out running against Ohio State's defense, and they finish well in space, something that Ohio State did not do well. Again, Ohio State finished the year actually with a less point efficiency in transition they did than in their actual half-court offense. Think about that. They were worse on points per possession in transition than actual running offense. That's really, really sad. And it's not athleticism. It's a lack of strength at the rim. It's a lack of ball handling. Those things matter. I would argue that ball handling, as far as creating shots for yourself and scoring at the rim, I would argue all those things I mentioned are more important than athleticism. Because if you're an athlete that can jump out of the gym 41-inch vertical like Sam Thompson, that doesn't make you a good ball handler. It doesn't make you a good finisher or a scorer. It's just, there's so much nuance, and I hate when people boil it down. I'm not saying athleticism. Look, Ohio State is probably middle tier this year in terms of true, pure athleticism. They're probably middle of the road in the Big Ten. But I would argue it was not anywhere near the biggest problem. Skill, yes. Decision-making, absolutely. Size outside of Caleb Wesson was a big issue, I think. And I think that's one of the reasons why Ohio State is looking for outside help for a backup, because they can't get caught with Wesson not being in the lineup next year. They have to have a true big, a rim protector or a big body to draw fouls or rebound. Do some of those little things. Kyle Young had a great first half of the season, and he got hurt, and he was never the same offensively. Kyle Young's game is rim runs, off of pick and rolls, okay? Getting to the rim. He's great at those. He's a great offensive rebounder. He's good at doing the dirty work, getting the loose balls, and then putting them back and finishing. That's his game. He's not a big. Jaden Leday, a young kid. He's not real good on the block yet, not real comfortable, not confident with his post moves. He was recruited as a 4, and he was asked to be a backup center because Micah Potter left the team this year. He filled his role to the point that he could with his experience level. I think talent is there. Eventually, he's a guy that could step out, hit a jumper 18 feet away. He's a guy that can be a good post player. But he's not a true post player right now. And Ohio State lacks that. They lack the size. They lack the skill on the perimeter. They have flaws. Don't get me wrong. This team is offensively challenged. But you ask me to put in order all of the things that went wrong for Ohio State this year in a transition year, athleticism is very low on the list. I'm telling you, when you see two experienced, or I should say quality ball handlers next year, because DJ Carton won't be experienced, but he's going to be talented. But when you see two very good ball handlers that facilitate, you will see so much better a team because you can fill in the shooters around them. Not only will they have the inside-out option in Caleb Wesson, you kick the ball down to the post and then get it back out to your shooters, but then you're going to have a guy that can create the shot, can get the ball in the middle, and then kick it back out to the shooters. And that's something they did not have this year. Again, not an athleticism issue. It's a ball handling issue. It's an instinct issue. It's a decision-making issue. It's a quick first step. It's the strength to finish at the rim. All of these things culminated to an Ohio State team that, hey, it looks like Chris Holtman got the most out of them, and he probably did. But it was more nuanced than that. They had good rebounders for their size. They had decent athletes, not great athletes, but decent athletes. They had decent free throw shooting as a team this year. It just came down to streaky shooting, bad ball handling, and bad decision-making. When the turnovers were there, or weren't there, I should say, Ohio State was fine. The shooting, hit or miss, there's not much you can do about that as a coach. You can't teach shooting. You can't coach it. You can't nudge it along during the course of a game. You can just only hope that guys take good shots and that they hit them. Ohio State against Houston, I said it in the first half. I said, they were only down 8 at halftime, and it felt like Ohio State was still in the game. But the problem was you didn't feel real confident about it because Ohio State was hitting almost 50% from three-point range, and most of their shots were behind the arc because they couldn't get anything inside. And again, I just feel it's not athleticism was the issue. It's that they didn't have the ball handlers. Caleb Weston sat a lot of the first half, so they couldn't play the inside-out game with him because he wasn't on the floor due to foul trouble. But they just didn't have anybody that could get into space. And it's not athleticism. It's not quickness. It's just you got to be good with the ball. You got to be quick with the ball. You can be the greatest athlete and be slow with the ball. You can be the worst athlete and be quick with the ball. It's just more nuanced. So anyhow, I don't want to beat a dead horse. I'm just saying in the retrospective here of Ohio State basketball, athleticism wasn't the issue. But the good news is, they do have some athletes coming in. DJ Carton is a very good athlete. He won the dunk competition as a 6-foot point guard over there in Bettendorf, Iowa. Great explosive guard. He is athletic, but he's quick. He's great handle. He's got a great handle, tight handle. He can beat people off the dribble. He can see the floor, distribute. He does everything you want a point guard to do. His shooting is a little hit or miss right now, but it'll come along. CJ Walker doesn't have the athletic ability of DJ Carton or the explosiveness, but he's also a very good point guard. All these things that they need will get so much better because it starts at the point guard position. It's going to allow guys like Luther Muhammad and Dwayne Washington and Musa Jallow to be more natural scorers, and they'll be able to play their ability and not have to do things they're not comfortable with. Once you have 2 or 3 guys that can handle the ball and get to the rim and score and finish, everything else becomes easier. So Ohio State basketball next year, I'm going to go out on a limb here before I get into football. I will say I think you are going to see a much different Ohio State team next year. So much so that I think Ohio State will finish in the top 3 in the Big Ten and the top 15 overall. I know it's a very early preliminary prediction. Probably not the right time to do it, right? But I am going to say this because I think that Ohio State is going to have 2 very good point guards. I think you're going to see much better consistency in shooting out of Washington, Muhammad, and Jallow. Justin Ahrens might be back in the mix. But then you have Gaffney and Lydell, and there's a different feel to this team. You're going to see Kyle Young is going to be back fully healthy, presumptively, and he wasn't fully healthy down the stretch, I don't think. At least I hope that that's the case, because he didn't look the same as he did earlier in the year. Before he got hurt, he looked really crisp, athletic. He was getting a lot of put back baskets, and he was getting some of those garbage points. But we didn't see that out of him late in the season. And I think that's the injury speaking. We'll see. But I think this Ohio State team, last thought on this, they've got the point guards coming. That's going to change everything. You're going to see a big difference next year, and it's not that they're going to change athletically that much. A little bit. Gaffney and Carton, yes, they're better athletes. But the overall big picture, it's not going to be much different athletically. But the skill level will be different. The instincts will be different. And having that point guard, that is going to be the difference between Ohio State this year and Ohio State next year.
Stretch runtime here at Unscripted Ohio. Kick up your feet as we cross the finish line with the Buckeye Beat, the latest in Ohio State news and notes.
Kick the tires and light the fires, Big Daddy.
Spring practice is in full swing. Look, there's not much to tell you on the quarterback situation. We know we're just kind of waiting out till fall gets here. Justin Fields is going to be the starting quarterback no matter how much the coaching staff is going to delay this decision. I'm sure they'll probably wait till the fall to announce this, and who could blame them? Competition breeds success. You want these guys both feeling like the job is not theirs to win. And even if that's the case with Justin Fields, and even if he's a 99% lock or near lock to win the quarterback job, you want him to continue to battle. From what we've seen early reports through practice, Field is a little inconsistent. You expect that. He's learning a new system. He's in a new place. he's going to be up and down. The good news is spring practice is the time to do this because the games don't count. There are no games. The spring game is just an exhibition. It's just something to put on for the fans. 100,000 people will come out on April 13th because they want to see Justin Fields play. I mean, they come out for the spring game anyway, but there's extra incentive for Ohio State fans to go out on April 13th because of the curiosity surrounding Justin Fields. That's just the way it is. But it's not going to matter until fall practice gets around. Justin Fields will be the quarterback, and you hope by then all the kinks will be ironed out. He'll have the experience, the reps, and the comfort level. But what really is interesting to me is, people, I know it's spring practice. This is why, we talk about spring practice here because people legitimately want to know what's going on, but there's always a danger at reading too much into this, and you can get paralysis by analysis. And I want to show you an example of this because I saw a tweet over the weekend when the Student Appreciation Day, there was an open practice over there, and it was reported that Terada Mitchell was getting reps with the ones at linebacker, and everybody was, freaking out. Oh, this means Mitchell has maybe number one on the depth chart, and he's past Borland, who I know everybody's favorite whipping boy is Tough Borland, or he's past, Bear and Browning. But as it turns out, both Borland and Browning were sitting out due to injury. So we really don't know. These things have to be taken with a grain of salt. Injuries are a huge factor in spring practice. And the other thing is, too, look, I'm not saying Mitchell can't or won't win the inside linebacking position by fall practice. He could. His talent is immense. We're hearing such rave reviews about how he's playing in practice. But people just take everything with a grain of salt, what you're hearing out of spring practice, because it really doesn't matter. Spring practice is a time to just get reps for people. It's a time, the newcomers to understand the offense or understand the defense, the scheme, to get familiar with the daily routine, the daily grind. There's so much that goes into spring practice and who's running with the ones and who's running with the twos. At the end of the day, all of this stuff, it's great conversation. When you have a podcast here, like it's great for me. I love talking about it. And I love that we get to have these conversations here and on Twitter at KYLam8 or Unscripted Ohio 1 for the Unscripted Ohio Twitter account. These are great conversations to have, and I'm not saying don't have them, but we just got to remember, and I have to remind myself of this too. I make the same mistake as a hopeless romantic with the Reds fan, as a Reds fan. I've been telling myself for years not to put too much emphasis on spring training performance. You can look at these gaudy stats for a guy that comes out in the first couple of weeks of spring training and hits 5 or 6 home runs, and you get all excited about him, and you remember, yeah, you know what, he's doing this mostly against a guy that could be, slinging fastball, 90-mile-per-hour fastballs in single A next week, right? And that's what spring is. And it's the same for spring football. We get so carried away with spring practice and performance because we're just anxious to see it. We got to wait till August until, they get ready to tip off for real. But these practices, they're not even showcases. They're just dress rehearsals. Keep that in mind. So when you see some of these reports coming out about who's hot, who's not, who's running with the ones, just take it with a grain of salt. But on another note, one quick thing before we get any further, recruiting wise, I don't know if you saw this on Twitter. If you follow Julian Fleming, one of the best receivers in the country, maybe the best receiver in the country. You can debate that all you want. I'm not sure where I stand on it. I think he's, from what I've seen, just in limited highlights and video packages, I think he's the best in the country. But, hey, we can have that discussion for another day. But he was on Ohio State's campus this weekend, hanging out with legend Cabezos. Justin Fields responded to one of his tweets. He made some comments that he's really feeling at home with Ohio State, that he's really giving off the vibe that the Buckeyes may have a legitimate shot. I've been under the impression all along that he would wind up at Penn State. Depending on what you read and where you read, who you read, it looks like it's starting to shape up as an Ohio State-Clemson battle. And if you read between the lines with what's going on Twitter with some of these recruits and players, I might even go so far to say, just my opinion here, this is not based on what I would call inside information. this is just an educated hunch. I think Ohio State's going to land Fleming. I think he's one of those guys that's starting to establish a rapport with the Ohio State recruits. I think he's being sincere that he had a great time on Ohio State campus, and he could get home this week. And look, 2 weeks later, the feeling could wear off. He could forget about how great a time he had at Ohio State, and Clemson could be back in the lead, or Penn State could be in the lead. These things happen in recruiting, and we don't want to have a knee-jerk reaction because visits can wear off in a hurry. And I'm not sure that Fleming's going to commit like next week anyway. It's probably going to be a summer or fall decision, maybe even a January or February decision. Who knows with him? But I'm just saying I like where Ohio State stands. I think Ohio State is killing it in recruiting, and I've said that so many times on this show, but they're doing a really good job at receiver. You take into account Raheem Jarrett, who I think is still playing the game. I know people are freaking out as whether or not he's moving away from Ohio State. I think he's playing the game. I think he's in the picture for Ohio State. They have a legitimate shot at like 3 out of the top 5 or 6 receivers in the country, legitimately. And it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. So Ohio State killing it in recruiting. By the way, Legend Cabezos, I think, is going to be back in the fold with Ohio State here very soon. We'll see how that plays out. But I like where the momentum is going with a couple key recruits. They just need to get Cabezos and maybe Paris Johnson back in the picture here and sometime in the near future. Maybe it's the next couple months. And then I think they can hit some momentum going into the late summer, early fall. And when some of the official visits start picking up in earnest, that's going to be the time where if Ohio State has a couple of these guys in the fold, has vocal recruiting leaders, then I think they're going to see a lot of momentum pick up. So that's it for the Unscripted Ohio podcast. Ohio State basketball, it's pretty much a wrap. We'll keep an eye on this because you never know if you're going to have transfers here at the end of the year. You may have some grad transfers coming in. Diallo could commit. We remember he visited Ohio State last week. Who knows what's going to happen with some of these things, but we'll keep an eye on Ohio State basketball, and we'll pay a lot more attention now to spring football going forward the next couple of weeks, building up to the Ohio State spring game on April the 13th. That's going to do it for the Unscripted Ohio podcast. As I said, thank you to our new title sponsor, JFQ Lending. Thanks always, of course, to BuckeyeGrove.com. Without them, this show would not be possible. Catch me on Twitter at KYLam8. You can also catch the show every Monday and Friday, BuckeyeGrove.com. Catch us on the archives, SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, and Stitcher. Remember Wednesday, Corey and Johnny coming up with the Scarlet and Gray podcast, and I will be back on Friday with more Unscripted Ohio. Have a great week, everybody.
You can get new episodes of Unscripted Ohio on Mondays and Fridays exclusively at BuckeyeGrove.com or anytime on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all things Ohio State.